Thank you.
Yeah. For whatever reason, just give me a sec, John. Something weird happened with Zoom and my machine right now.
And we are live on Zoom.
Every week we open wide the virtual stage where ideas spark and wisdom fills the page. From the UK to the land of maple trees, John and Mike bring clarity with ease. We're building meetings, webinars with might, helping you shine your message, taking flight. Whether you're new or you've done this before, Lord Zoom Live will help you do much more. We're building meetings, webinars with might, helping you shine your message, taking flight. Whether you're new or you've done this before, Lord Zoom Live will help you do much more. Thank you for joining us, we're glad you're here. Together we grow, it's loud and clear. On Zoom we connect, we learn, we grow. Welcome my friend, enjoy the show. To breakout rooms with flair, we've got the tools and we're ready to share. Guest experts drop in, bringing gold each time, with insights and tricks to help you climb. Can't make it live? We've got you still on YouTube and LinkedIn. We're giving that thrill, so tune in later or catch us next round. Either way, your success is where we're bound. Thank you for joining us, we're glad you're here. Together we grow, it's loud and clear. On Zoom we connect, we learn, we glow. Welcome my friend, enjoy the show. And make it live, we've got you still. On YouTube and LinkedIn, we're giving that thrill. So tune in later or catch us next round. Either way, your success is where we're bound. Take the spotlight, the stage is yours. Bring your message through virtual doors. Each week we gather, and now you know you're not alone, so let it flow. Thank you for joining us, now go and shine. Share what you've learned, your voice, your time. With Lord Zoom Live, your power will grow. It's time to build your own show.
Hi. Welcome to Lord Zoom Live, where we thought, as it's Christmas, we'll bring out a nice, easy subject. How about looking forward to 2026 with more content and less effort? Does that sound like a present you want to open? Well, I hope so, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Today is about doing less and producing more. In this episode, we're going to look at the live part of the event. But if we're going to do less and produce more, we need to pull a few tricks. We need to find a way to make the production of the event easier to do, especially if you're going to be repeating certain subjects over and over again, which is what I'm doing in my 100 webinar challenge for 2026. Yes, there will be an invite for you to join us. Now, I'd like to show you my lovely Christmas studio, but it's still in pieces. It's not ready yet. So we are down in the dungeon, and let's see what we can do today. So by the end of this session, I'm hoping that you're going to have excitement for running hybrid webinars. But what does hybrid mean in this case? Hybrid in this case means a mixture of live and recorded content all together into one webinar event. The simple question is, do you want to deliver the same pitch over and over and over again? You may get better, but at some point you will be bored and your quality will go back down again. So if we use a recording of the best version of the best bits of your best content and then put them into the presentation, people are going to think they might as well watch you on YouTube. However, if you then intersect those with real live content, interactive content, suddenly you've gone up 2 or 3 levels. So we're going to show you the ideas behind how we can do that. And I'm only going to show the ideas because I've already got at least 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, just to show you how the basic principles work. Therefore, in this presentation, we're going to go through the nuts and bolts, the whys and the wheres, and we'll leave the how to the next session. Let's have a look at the different parts of the system. And I've used some ChatGPT as well here to try and pull in some information from Zoom's own website. Let's see how it plays out. We're creating a hybrid webinar by combining pre-recorded and live content. And I am live. Or am I? Yeah, I'm live. The whole reason of doing this is to reduce technical stress, reduce issues, reduce things that can be done easily in advance but are harder to do live. There are many times when we do a presentation where you just don't know if it can work. But if you pre-record it, you know it's going to work. This also makes things easier for delivering to bigger audiences, to global audiences. For instance, you may have the same presentation to deliver 3 times. Thanks to Zoom, you can do the same presentation 3 times. But if the global audience has different languages, you can deliver the 3 times in 3 different languages. You can get it translated. You can get the introductions translated. You can get it dubbed over. This also shows Zoom that ChatGPT knew that from your website because I didn't put that bit in. That's going to help our AI, which is going to be part of this whole system in the future. And also, we maximize quality content. Quality content, we maximize. We maximize quality content. We maximize quality content. See, I can take all of those now and find the one that sounded the best and put that into my recorded version. And I have quality content with energy, not the other boring versions. It's not that easy. It's a lot easier than doing it all live, but it's not that easy. So let's look at the challenges that we have. The first challenge is, if you do it all live, does the presenter last the whole speech, or do they run out of energy? Especially if they're doing 3 or 4 presentations in a day, which is quite possible in this day and age. And if they get fatigued, are they going to fluff their lines? More important for me, are they going to sound tired? because we all know that words are one thing, but the way you deliver them is much more important, because I can be less great with the content, but if I put it with enthusiasm, you're still going to want to listen. Technical glitches, technical problems. If you have everything pre-recorded, then even if, and please don't do this to me, Mike, if I disappeared, the recording could take over. And lastly, those challenges from time zones and delivering it around the world. Supposing your CEO is only available for a 3 o'clock event and you want to do an event later or earlier. You could get the CEO to pre-record their presentation 2 days before, and it's all ready for you when you get there. So this is why I believe that a hybrid of recorded and real can take your presentation to another level. Recorded content guarantees consistency. If you've got specific demonstrations of product demonstrations, of system demonstrations, that content can be delivered face-to-face, pre-recorded, getting right every time. Also, one of the clever things you can do when you're delivering recorded content is you carry on interacting with the audience. If I put a presentation out there and part of it is pre-recorded, while the recording is playing, I can not only have a sip of drink and calm my vocal cords, I can have a look at the chat, I can have a look at the Q&A, I can have a look at all the feedback that we've been having from the audience to make sure that when I take over again live, am I delivering the right content? Do I need to change things? Do I need to explain something because everybody was confused on a certain point? Is there something missing in the presentation that needs to be highlighted? And hybrid also gives us this scalability. Taking an event and multiplying it out makes it a bigger product for a bigger audience with still the same amount of presentation effort. You could keep the main presenter to one event. You could add an MC to convert all the other events into a live interactive experience, but your main speaker doesn't have to do all the presentations. An MC can deliver the other content, and that makes things easier. So let's go on then. How do we build a hybrid webinar stack? Well, it's easy and it's difficult, but some bits will be really obvious that they need to be live, and some bits will be really obvious that they need to be recorded. So let's have a look at what we can do. Well, the first thing is we can use Simulive, which is Zoom's own pre-recorded system for delivering the content at the beginning. Simulive means that we can start the webinar with a pre-recorded section at the beginning that can be delivered to the audience while everybody else is getting sorted out, making sure things are working. You can deliver all that pre-show and starting the show type content automatically. That may be just pre-show clips and reels to get people interested in a recording. It could be the questions or the rules of engagement for the meeting, how people should interact. All of that could be delivered as a Simulive. You still have the option in the Simulive for people to put in the Q&A. You still have the option for people to put things in chat. And you can interact with both those groups. So it doesn't stop the interaction from building just because you drop a recording in at the beginning of the webinar. But you can still make great use of content in that pre-recorded Simulive. And then once that's gone, you go live for the interaction. Yes, I must warn you, it is a slightly disjointed jump from Simulive to live at the moment. Zoom are working on it. I'm hoping it will be more fluid in the future, but it is a little bit abrupt. That doesn't matter. We can always compensate for that. Go live. And what can you do when you go live? Well, you can take all that introductory data of people saying where they were, where they're live, what their Q&A questions are before it even starts, what's the feedback. Maybe you ask a few poll questions for where they are looking at the particular product from a point of view of what they want. And then you take that information and make that part of the welcome. Once you have your live system running, then you could be running Production Studio like we are now. Production Studio is Zoom's own simple to use production software that allows us to mix our content. In this Production Studio environment we are now, I'm on stage and I have a screen share from actually another user. And hiding in the background, working it all, is the one and only Mike Clatter. And I suppose you want to know, is he really there? Yes, he is. Hi, Mike. How's things at the back stage?
So far, so good. Officially, I'm not backstage because I cannot run Production Studio from backstage, but which I wish Zoom would actually fix, because in theory, I should be able to run it from backstage. In a true production environment, I would. But hi, everybody. Back to you, Johnny.
I believe they're working on the backstage idea as well as the transition, Mike. Or at least they keep promising us that they've heard and they will try and have a go.
Right.
Of course, the other bit of technology which you like is not using just Zoom's production studio, but using a production system like vMix, OBS, others are available, and then really bring in a full production system into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it brings up the professional look to your content. You know, it doesn't have to be boring, one person just talking into a camera situation where you're sharing a screen, which John is officially doing through a different user. But through Production Studio, of course, I'm doing all the switching that you've been seeing up to this point, and I will be going back to that here momentarily.
Yes, so I have a laptop down there which is doing all the slideshows, so that gives me separate control of the slideshow. With Zoom, it can be remotely controlled, but as it's literally arm's length down here, I've not bothered with the remote control, but Mike could be remote controlling that slide deck if he had an idea of where I was going with all the slides, which he doesn't because I only wrote it this afternoon, but never mind. Also, exactly, I could be running on my main machine, I could be running vMix, which is my production studio software of choice. And that would allow me then within my little graphic window here, I could drop in lower thirds, I could put some animations, I could move to the side and put some graphics maybe to the side of me there, and I could mix it up on my own screen. And this screen could be part of Mike's production studio, or I could just take over the whole screen. I'm running everything from here. But if I brought Mike into my meeting, we would then have the lag because I'd be bringing them into my computer system here, and then I'd be sending him back out to the internet. And of course, he's live. Whereas in Production Studio is in the cloud. We are both transmitting to the cloud, and then the cloud is bringing it back. And we have, in fact, an extra participant in the meeting because Production Studio is seen as another person in our Zoom webinar and is sitting in the group, and Production Studio is the one all the Production Studio content comes from. So as far as it goes with pre-recorded content, we could put pre-recorded content through Mike, giving us a video maybe from Production Studio. Like, for instance, the theme tune that we played at the beginning. Or I could introduce some pre-recorded content through a content management system sitting on my machine and then pipe it through vMix or OBS or any of the other Production Studio software. And of course, I could also go multi-camera as well, which as I will come on to later, is another neat trick when you are doing hybrid, pre-recorded and live content. So thank you, Mike, for all your hard work you're doing. And I know there'll be another section, because I've written it on purpose, that we'll get some great feedback from you on as well. So let's go to the next thing, which is talking about Simulive, the Simulive Essentials, as ChatGPT decided to call it. I think I changed the name of that, but the slide never updated it. So this is interesting because we will now know whether ChatGPT actually understands Simulive as well as I do. But the whole idea of Simulive is pre-recorded content, but specifically, this is pre-recorded content at the very beginning of your presentation. At this point, and there's not been that many subtle hints that they would need to do it in the future, but for now, the idea of Simulive is Simulive starts your meeting for you with a pre-recorded content. And I think that's probably the way it's going to always stay. As far as I'm concerned, that's easily good enough, because once I go to the live bit, then Mike has the chance within all of his production studio options to bring in a scene which is a video. So he can bring a video in, and in fact, in production studio, he can bring a video in, and at the end of that video, it can cascade to another video or another slide or whatever content he wants to put into the next scene. So once we are up and running, so to speak, I don't think Simulive is needed to carry on. But remember, and I think I did, yes, I did remember to mention it at the beginning, while Simulive is running, I am able to put in polls and to interact with the chat, or Mike could, or anyone could in Backstage. And that's why Mike wants to go to Backstage, because he can run it all from there. So we can have a high quality presentation at the beginning, which is always the most panicky part of any webinar. Is everything working? Are we going to YouTube properly? Don't know. Let's have a look. Is everything fine? If you've got a Simulive to get the whole thing started, it's got to be easier to run. And we have the ability to interact with the people. So I think that is a really neat way to start presentations when you're doing pre-recorded and recorded together. Take the pressure off your whole system to go up from point A and give yourself a Simulive start, and make the Simulive start 10 minutes before the official opening time. That way, the audience haven't got a time to get in. You've got a chance to see that all the streaming is working. And you haven't yet had to physically go on stage yourself. So if you're running it with a small production team, or you're running it even on your own with no production team, thanks, Mike, for being here, I feel that Simulive allows you to start the whole thing off. You can check everything is working. You can make sure everybody's doing things. While the Simulive's running, if you have any technical issues, you can fix them. And then when it gets to the end, you've got two choices. Actually, you've got three, thinking about it. One is you could just end the whole thing and have it been completely run by Simulive. I don't like doing that myself, but it is possible. And that was the original way that Zoom made Simulive work. It was just a pre-recorded webinar. That's because there are some rather silly people. I'm sorry, I know who you are, and you're some really clever people, but you are really silly if you are doing webinars that are totally pre-recorded in this day and age. Your audience deserves better. Quite simply, your audience deserves better. But there's nothing wrong with doing the intro and the original start in a Simulive and then taking over in a real-time environment. That looks, sounds, and feels good, because now that's my second option. My second option is to let the Simulive run and then take over. But I said there were three options. I didn't forget there is a third option. And you're probably wondering what the third option can be. Well, the third option is actually really cheeky, because the third option is you take over the webinar before the Simulive even finishes. This to me is another brainwave that I bet Zoom never had. You see, if I know that I can take over the Simulive early, then I am probably going to write and record a longer Simulive intro, knowing that if things are working well, I'm going to go in here. And if things aren't going in well, I'm going to wait until later and then take over. Or if there's some interaction, which I expect early and I don't get much, maybe I won't come live until later on as well. I can put some extra content into my Simulive as a backup to things not working the way I expected them to, or the audience not working the way I expected them to. So there's the three ways you can take over Simulive. You can not take over at all and the webinar will just end. You can take over when the Simulive is finished, or you can interrupt the Simulive whenever you want and take over from that point. Therefore, you've got great options, I believe, to use Simulive. You can make it part of your main presentation, although I don't like that because I like to do a warm-up with the audience. And then I'll put my main presentation through Production Studio. But you could. You've got live interaction during that presentation, and you've got the workflow benefits, which I've gone through. I think I may have spoken ahead of my slide there. So to set up a Simulive is actually really easy. You record the presentation, you upload that into Zoom, and then you tell Zoom that you want that to be scheduled at the beginning. It plays back automatically, so don't worry about what ChatGPT thinks. It actually works just automatically, and then you hand over at the end of it, or you jump in and hand over just to yourself earlier. Doesn't matter. Here are just a few little things that I think we need to look at. You need to have a good quality and well-edited recording, bearing in mind what the world's going to look like when you take over. Okay, you may confess that it's all a pre-roll, B-roll type start, but it's still good that you have some sort of consistency between the live and the recorded. Whoops, no, the recorded's there, isn't it? Recorded and live, because you start recording and then you go live. You need some consistency. You don't want too many congruent problems between the two. You want them to be seen. You want to make sure, though, that the audience doesn't feel that you just dumped a video on them and ignoring them. So you want to put in the chat. You want to do polls. You want to do interaction. You want them to be raising hands and reaction things running around the screens. And hopefully, eventually, we will have a smooth transition between the two versions. But I'm afraid, as I said, at the moment, the transition is a little bit clunky. It's, well, it is what it is. Of course, if you didn't want that clunkiness, what you could do is you could go to the fallback position, which is use a Simulive just as the B-roll. And then once you're ready to go live with the event, you could immediately go to Production Studio, but then put in a pre-recorded content, maybe even pop on the screen and say, hi, everyone, and then put the pre-recorded content for the main part of the beginning and the introduction to the webinar. So there are lots of other options for doing stuff. Therefore, when Simulive is going, you've got a chance to interact with the people, see what they're going up, what's going on, see who's there, check if the main target customers for your presentation are there. Is the CEO supposed to be there as a guest, and are they there as a guest? And you can engage with them through the chat and get things going. But do be careful not to make the mistake of chatting to them as Bob when Bob is actually supposed to be on the screen talking to them. they might then realize that one bob cannot be real. And you want to make sure that they think you're real in the chat and not some assistant typing away. Otherwise, again, you can lose credibility. By the way, one little freebie for you. When you are back and live, make sure you refer to things that happened in the chat. That way you are proving that you are real and live because you know what the chat is. Yes, I've got a little message here from somebody saying, maybe you could put a stooge in to ask a question that's already in the recording. Yes, you could do that, but that's really cheeky. You really want to interact with the right audience. So as you transition to your live segments, you need an expert like Malik to bring things through and switch from one screen to another, so that once your system is running and you're into production studio, it seems really easy. However, don't forget that if you have a Simulive and it is created of multiple segments, make sure the transitions between those segments is clean and easy. And better still, make sure that those segments work together in the same way Production Studio does, because that way there will be less disruption of going from one style to the other. Make sure also that people know things are happening. We should ask Mike about this. And by saying that, I've given a hint to Mike that he's going to come on the screen in a second and be asked a question. So if you are going from pre-recorded to live and backwards and forwards, you need to know how you're going to give hints or the cues so people know when they're supposed to start talking, when the live is taken over from the recorded. Now, Mike, you are quite good at doing this because you do quite a few productions yourself, and you're good at jumping around between live and pre-recorded and things, aren't you? And multiple cameras.
I do. And again, it is a bit of an art. To the art of the transition would be the right saying to actually say that. You know, I'm taking visual cues from John for the most part, and on top of that too, I am not only listening to John as he is speaking, but I'm also knowing that there's going to be, through, again, a bit of practice, because John and I have been doing this for several weeks now. I understand his, I guess the right word, mannerism. John, would that be the right term? Mannerism, in the regards of, I know from speaking with John that it feels like it's going to be a transition, or this would be a great time to do a transition, or John's going to be doing this, then he's going to be going to that. And I'm visually ahead of time predicting what John is actually coming up with. And that's why the storytelling, and it becomes that you're doing a proper storytelling, because if it's very abrupt, it actually causes more grief, and the content that John is presenting then becomes very stagnant in the regards of, you're not going to get the proper story that John is trying to tell us today in the webinar / YouTube / archive. If you are watching us in the future, that you now understand fully the content that John is doing it without abrupt interruption, and making sure that it's properly transitioned between topics. You know, I'm doing my best to not ahead of time even knowing what John has got for slides, but making sure that, you know, certain slides are very important, to make sure that I went, as you noticed, full screen on the slide. Then I went back to John being a slide, and, you know, having John beside it. And then I went to John just speaking himself, because right now he was talking off the cuff. He wasn't necessarily talking about what was specifically on the slide. So again, I'm paying attention to John's way that John presents. And again, it's just knowing your presenters very well too. That will definitely help in the process of doing your transitions from slide to not showing a slide, or content to content, or going from a video that John would all of a sudden say, okay, and you know, and again, perfect example would be where you have your visual or audio cues that in this upcoming video, what did he just tell me? Now, John knows that I know that there's a bunch of videos already in production studio ready to go. and he's going to basically tell you what video it is. And that already gives me the visual cue that he's already doing what we call in the broadcast world a segue into the content, right? And that segues, mannerism, transitions, they're all intertwined amongst all the different stuff. And again, yes, a lot of this is production related, but again, if you watch that newscast or if you watch that any show, pick your weekly show, pick your even your movie, if all of a sudden you went from this scene to that scene, but it doesn't make any sense, then you're losing the story.
Yes, I think that the issue that I probably have with our setup this evening is that when I do a lot of presentations and I am doing Mike's job as backstage and monitoring everything and managing it all, I will have all the presentations myself. And so I have a good idea of what's happening later on in the presentations because I've got all the slides in front of me. Maybe we could have improved this by not only slide sharing the slides for you, the great audience, but I could have done a multiple share. I don't know if my laptop will take it. I think it probably would. Do a multiple share so that I could also share the speaker's view. So Mike could see what the notes are and could also see what the next slides are. So he would be able to plan for even better ahead because he's more informed. And if I remember, that's something we may do next. Because although you can only see the two of us nodding here and chatting together, Mike can see all the other screens that are available to him that he can use in production studio. So a second share mic would with the speaker's notes or the rule of the lay of what's going to happen next would probably be useful in this scenario.
Yeah, and again, it would not necessarily be a source that I would use, of course, because there's no reason to use that source in production studio. But again, it becomes a source that at least now in production studio, and one of these days we will figure out how to actually, you know, if you want to be that want to watch us live doing this and also live switching the show as well, that we might be able to get really cutesy one of these days, John, to actually have not only are you watching the live topic, but if you want the behind the scenes, you could actually go to a separate feed potentially down the road where you're actually watching my screen as I'm doing production studio switching and how I'm actually moving things around in production studio. And you'll be able to, you know, it won't be necessarily interactive in the regards of you may not hear audio, you may not hear everything done, but again, you get the what we call in the video switcher world, we'll call that the multi-view version of seeing what production studio really is and why I'm going to certain things and why I'm getting certain things ready before I'm actually showing it to the live audience. Be that the participant in the Zoom webinar, in our case, the Zoom Webinar Plus, or as we're doing today for everybody watching us on YouTube today, live.
And I expect you to be very impressed when we do that, because production studio, as I understand it, doesn't allow us to screen share more than one screen. So we'll have to get some clever jiggery pokery going on in the background to do that seminar, but I've already got a couple of ideas of how to do it. So we'll see about that.
Me too. Me too.
Excellent. Well, it's always good to plan the next event while you're only 2/3 of the way through the previous one. Gives you the confidence to go through to the end, knowing what's happening next. So exactly as Mike said, this smooth handover and the control and having it all working and know what's going to happen. You need to have your Simulive, your live contents and your pre-recorded contents all to be in the same sort of style, the same sort of mode of flipping from one to the other, so that they feel the same. Otherwise, it's going to get very disjointed very quickly, and that will not look good. That will take away from all the wonderful things that you've done. And that brings me to a niggle against all those wonderful presenters who come online and dump you with a recording because they can't be bothered to attend their own webinars. What do you say when you go live? Well, how about interacting with the audience straight away? In the first 60 seconds, take the audience by the hand and welcome them, name people. I have a very naughty habit of making sure that when a webinar starts, I say something that's really of the moment, humorous, something that will get the attention of the presenter. And then I know within 30 seconds if the presenter is real or a recording, or a recording, or a, oh, sorry, that was me doing a recording of a recording. It was a pathetic joke, but it's also just as pathetic when people ignore the audience because they're not even there. A scripted introduction is also really useful. And if it isn't a scripted introduction, then it wants to be an introduction that you do regularly. There is nothing wrong with making the odd mistake here and there. But, however, please try and make sure that for at least 60 seconds you can deliver some interesting content without falling over. And my brain is now trying to remember, did I do that in this presentation? Because you will lose the audience immediately if you don't come in with a bang. So get your content ready for those first couple of minutes. I don't use a script, but I have ideas and I have short little paragraphs in my brain which I will throw out, and they work for me. I will make sure that my introduction is going to mention anything that's gone through the chat that's funny, that's humorous, that people have commented on. I might look at the polls and welcome the different groups of people that come through the polls. I might know from the attendance list some important people that are there that I want to name drop. Want to make the beginning of a presentation interesting, encouraging, interactive. And although I can't think of what it would be with the letter I in front of it, it's got to be, oh yes, inclusive. Name the people that are there. So let's have a look at Production Studio then. Once Production Studio takes on, what have we got? Well, we've got all these scenes. They are sets of boxes. And in the boxes, there are boxes. And the boxes in the boxes are a choice of speakers or a screen share. And they're all laid out in nice, lovely, pretty ways. And they're also available in different sizes. And what that means is you don't have to have a full 9x16. You can have a cropped version. And the reason I can't stick my arms out so far is because I believe this particular version of my screen theme is actually, I think it's 5x4 rather than 9x16. So it's cropped. If it's cropped, you can get more people in a line having a conversation. If it's a full screen, you take up the full screen. But if it's cropped, you have a group of people side by side. It fills up the screen better. So you have these different layouts and these scenes, and these are the things that Mike is playing around with and using, and that's how he's getting the scenes to change. He's selecting scenes with different people in it, which is me or me and him or me in a presentation. Okay, that's quite boring. There's only 3 different versions, but I could be the presentation with me underneath. It could be the presentation with me to one side or the other. There are variations that can be used, and I'm not asking him to go through the whole lot now. It's fine, Mike, don't worry. This is seamless content transitions. Well, they're pretty much one after the other in Zoom Production Studio. Yes, you can have more fancy transitions in other tools, but the transitions for Zoom here are just pretty much one takes over from the other. But that's okay. That's acceptable. And you would bear that in mind if you're going to use transitions elsewhere. You don't want to have one system looking really obvious, like it's just changed now. Bang, bang, bang. And then somewhere else you've got these, I don't know, box transitions and animations. It could look silly. So be careful to choose what you're going to choose. And you also want to have multiple video support. Why do you want multiple video support? Because it's the biggest and best hack you can have from going from recorded to pre-recorded by having two cameras. I could talk to this camera as live, and then when I turn my head over here, a pre-recorded content could take over. And the disjoint between moving between the two would make it easier to mix me live and me pre-recorded. Although try to make sure you're wearing almost the same things. Although if you have your hat at a different angle, people don't always notice. I've actually been in an event where I've completely changed my clothes and nobody noticed. Okay, there was a break between, but I was on the stage in one top, and then for the second half, I came back on stage with this completely different top. Nobody ever noticed, or at least had the courage to challenge me about that. These also allow the variation of controls. In other words, I could use Production Studio to have a thin version of me. I could use Production Studio that I could be at the different sides of the screen. Maybe I want to go to one side of the screen and present the slides. Maybe I want to go underneath the screen because I want to talk about something and then I can point to it. There are lots of different ways that I may want to be able to interact with the other parts in the Production Studio screen. It may be that I want to add things on my own as well, but I can't do that through Production Studio, but I can do it through an overlay, or I can use a production product like vMix or OBS to mix something in my own world as well. So what would you want to pre-record in Production Studio? Well, if there are things that need to be done over and over and over again, and they're always the same, like a product demo or a customer testimonials, well, let's start with product demos, shall we? Product demos, obviously you want to be perfect. So that is a really good candidate for recording, but customer testimonials are even better because the customer's not going to turn up to every webinar to give you their testimonial. Not unless you drag them out of the audience as a surprise, but most of the time they're not going to do that. So that is a really useful and active thing to use. Customer testimonials, put the customer testimonials in the videos and they will all work. If you've got introductory videos to set the tone to, you know, like an ad, like a pre-roll ad, but the ad is about your own organization, make those a pre-recorded content. You can put them in Production Studio, you can run them off your own production software. Anything that doesn't need to change over time, if you're going to deliver content over time, whether it's 3 webinars that are different time zones for your organization, or it's a webinar that you're going to run weekly for a few months, or even just indefinitely, reusable content that doesn't change is going to be a lot easier in a video format and not live. Whereas the interaction about that content and the questions coming from the audience, obviously, they need to be live. So Production Studio is really easy. You just upload pre-recorded clips, you put them in the scenes, and you switch to them during your presentation. Now, the only restriction you have in Production Studio, and it's a good one as far as I'm concerned for today, is keeping it simple. You've got to preload all your recordings before you start. If you haven't preloaded them, they're not available. It's as simple as that. That may seem to be a challenge, and it is, but Production Studio in itself is not here to replace the broadcast industry. It's here to have an easy way to deliver reasonable content in a reasonable way, in a reasonable time, at a reasonable cost. And the cost is free once you have an events license for Zoom or Webinar Plus. So Production Studio is a great, I don't know what word to use. I should have thought about what word I was going to have for this, but it's like a good container for your overall event, and it keeps things simple. And it also allows anybody who is responsible as a co-host to run for you. So Mike is running this without any problem just by pulling down the menu and taking control of Production Studio. Now, if there was a reason that he was going to take the stage, I could take Production Studio control over, and I could then become the controller of the scenes, and he could do a presentation. This is all done because Production Studio is in the cloud. From the summer of 2025, it has been in the cloud, and this makes life so much easier. You don't need a complicated PC. Anybody can take it over who has the understanding of the technology, and they can do the presentations, controls, and bringing in the recordings and all the other things. And they can take over from somebody else, like somebody else can take over slide control. They can take over the control of that. Whereas if we were using, and we do have, both of us, production software for doing much more fancy things, it's a lot more difficult to get remote control of those types of tools when you're in different, well, we're in different continents. So it is difficult to do that. You then need a whole new level of technology to be able to talk to each other's computers to take that production software to work as well. So Production Studio working in a live environment works really well. So what about vMix and OBS integration? Well, these are pieces of software that run on a computer, or they might be, if they were perhaps a Blackmagic control box, they could be hardware. And they're going to take lots of video sources and content, which could be from computers, from cameras, and they can mix it all together. They can even take content from another Zoom meeting or event or other types of content like that, maybe sent by RTMP, or they could be sending one event to another event. I've seen that happen where one event is running in one place, another group are watching it from another event. All this software can interact with the users, and the only catch is how you get the vMix or the OBS or the other content into Zoom. Now you've got, as far as I can think of it off the top of my head, 3 ways. Great, because you know I always love the rule of 3. So the first way is you can just stream it in as your camera. So I could put some lower thirds graphics here. I could have some graphics all around me, bring them in from vMix or OBS or another tool. I could make my own video disappear into a corner or something as a little circle and bring some content up using these tools, and it would be in my video window. And if I wanted it to be full screen, then Mike could quite easily make me full screen, and therefore I am now the entire screen. Look, he's done it. He's so clever, this guy. And there we are, all in the screen. So I can bring in content from all over the place, and it wouldn't matter because I'm now the whole screen. But another way we could bring it in is we could bring it in as an RTMP feed, which effectively is a streaming feed. We can make a streaming feed effectively another user, and they could come in. So I could be a RTMP feed now, and you wouldn't know. Although I've never actually tried to bring one into Production Studio, but I believe they're brought in as a person. That will be something we'll have to play with when we do the demonstrations. However, that's number 2. And number 3 is I could possibly bring my vMix OBS content in as a screen share. So I could use it as a screen share, and that could be where all my mixing here goes. Or if I want to really show off, I could do as many of those variations at the same time, really, if I wanted to. But that would be the way that I would bring a screen share in. If I wanted to do a screen share and I wanted to do fancy screen share, I could do that, and then I would still be my own camera for looking in on the meeting as well. So those are the 3 ways you can do it. And guess what? I've got a slides all about this, and hopefully I've covered all the right things. So vMix and OBS give you, without apology, gives you a much better environment than Production Studio. But that's because their entire system's dedicated to do it. Production Studio is just a utility. It's a really good utility. yeah, I was gonna hold back, but I'm not. For a lot of users that used to use OBS to bring in the odd scene and overlays, Production Studio is probably as good as they deliver on a basic OBS setup. OBS, Open Broadcast Software, haven't mentioned it, so better. Open Broadcast Software, and it's free. So it's quite often used by streamers and other people that want to do a bit more fancy, but in a simple way. It can be more complicated, but it does tend to get into hot water and problems if it gets too complicated. And that's why there are more advanced software like vMix, which is a product that both Mike and I use. Nevertheless, you still have scene type creations. You create scenes, you create layouts, whatever. They may be called different things in different applications, but at the end of the day, you create a layout. You may call it a scene, but you create a layout, and that layout can then replace another layout, and then you just have a whole set of them predefined. Sometimes you get more fancy. For instance, vMix allows you now to have 8 overlays. So I can have a fancy scene, and then I can drop in the odd overlay here and there. It works just the same. It's taking video sources, graphic sources, video camera sources, screen outputs from other computers, screen shares, just takes all that stuff and allows you to lay it out on a screen, have a different number of layouts, sometimes even animations, and just make the whole thing more interesting. Much more flexibility, much more scope, much more interesting, and I have to say it, don't I? Much more expensive, much more labor intensive, much more computer equipment needed to produce it, but then you get what you pay for or what you use. But the production values of those types of products just go to another level. And it can't be in the slides because I didn't mention it to ChatGPT when I was building this slideshow. There are even other pieces of software out there now which allow you to create 3-dimensional worlds and then bring that into Zoom. Actually, anything that you can produce on a computer and it ends up as a computer screen can be brought into Zoom. So really, it is unbelievable what is possible. Basically, anything you can do with a computer on a video screen could be part of your event in Zoom. But one little warning. If you make everything boring and you have one fancy bit and then everything goes boring again, you have raised your bar and then let down your audience. So if you are going to use more advanced systems and technology, try to make use of them during the whole event so that the experience is all at that level. Or if it's not every single piece at that level, it's going in and out of that level as you do different content. But again, it's all about consistency across the way. So vMix and OBS allow virtual cameras. So not just a physical camera, the one I've got in front of me, but virtual cameras that can be any video feed from anything. They can move around in wonderful ways. And this takes your webinar production to another level. So let's just give you a few basic examples to tie in. Given you a few already, but we could have a scene with a camera view. Mike's now looking at this thing thinking, can I actually simulate it all? But he doesn't need to because we all know how wonderful he is. There is a scene. You can have the examples given here by ChatGPT, by the way. I didn't tweet this in, so he added this. Not a bad move, ChatGPT. Quite impressed. Scene 1 features a host camera view providing a personal direct connection between the audience and the webinar. Wonderful. Full demo scene. Display of presentations to showcase content to viewers. So that could be a pre-recorded content. Lovely. Picture-in-picture layout. So we could have a picture-in-picture. Now, Production Studio, you can't overlay the content in the windows. But when you're using vMix or OBS, you can do that. As I said a little bit earlier, vMix allows you to have 8 overlays that you can pull in and pull out on top of whatever content you're delivering at any particular time. Now, that overlay may just be a logo. It may be right back. It may be vote now. You may have some preset overlays you're going to use many times during the presentation, but you can run those and it produces a more interactive scene. And you can have outro graphics. So when you finish a presentation a bit or a section, you may want to have some sort of outro graphic, or we're going to a break graphic, or an advert graphic, or something like that that's mixed in as well. So we can blend together our content. We can take our pre-recorded content. We can take speakers, interaction from speakers, panels. We can create content, engaging content that may be pre-recorded, or maybe we create it on the fly, but we can put all those things together and make interesting content. And those people that are running the same boring webinar pre-recorded over and over and over again should now feel ashamed. Cue the ashamed emoji. That's how you should feel. And for those that think that all this jiggery pokery is going to cause problems, as I've already said, but I want to specifically address, and I was thinking of doing it to you tonight, but you're too clever to fall for these tricks. If you change the angle of your hat a bit between two shots, nobody's going to notice. If you lose the hat completely and you haven't had your hair cut, because I missed my hairdressing appointment like me, people probably won't notice. Although they'll probably then remember that you should have had your hair cut, but they might not remember that you had a hat on before. If you change your glasses from one set to another, many people would not even notice. Glasses wearers probably a better chance. You can change your clothes. You can get away with transitions. What usually happens though, if you have a difference in the audio, then people will probably notice that that's happened. That's where you want to watch out for. Audio changes are the easiest for people to notice. But if you have recorded something at one level and then you come back, there's a bit of recorded, then you come back in a recording with a slightly different audio sound, put a gap between the two, and it's less likely that people will notice. But audio is easier to pick up than video. In fact, that's how Zoom is product managers. You know who you are, who do Simulive presentations. That's one of the ways we catch you out, because we can tell when the audio changes. We also tell when you don't take notice of our chat. But those are the two big traps to catch people. And transition cues are really important, not for me, but for Mike, so that Mike knows that I'm just about to go to the next slide share, and look, as if by magic, the slides appear back on the screen. How do I know that? Well, because I can see them out of the corner of my eye over there. So these are the gotchas to watch for. Audio playback coming back at a different quality or not so good quality. Rehearsals that turn out to be live that turn out to be rehearsals, speaking over when the system has gone live and you haven't turned your microphone off. All these are things to watch out for. And backup planning means, what are you going to do when things go wrong? Who's going to take over when things go wrong? And don't worry if it all goes completely wrong. When I did my presentation for Toastmasters International, my friend Diane gave me a slide which was a broken pencil. And so the plan was that if I ever had any technical difficulties over the 3 days, I could put the slide up with the broken pencil saying, sorry, I'll just fix that. I think it says something like that. And the broken pencil would be on the slide while I solved the problem. I was so disappointed that I didn't get a chance to use my broken slide that I actually used it on purpose on the last evening within the last 10 minutes of the whole webinar because I didn't get a chance to use her wonderful graphic. So where do we go from here? Well, we've already set some challenges for ourselves here internally to try and demonstrate all these things live, and that could be an interesting challenge. But have a look at your hybrid stack. Great term, thanks ChatGPT. So assess what you're going to do and what content you can have that's going to be real, live. What content can you create beforehand? What content is going to be used the same over and over again, and therefore that definitely needs to be pre-recorded. Maybe some of the presentations are going to be real live to start with, and then after 2 or 3 goes, the presenter will have got to a point where that's worth, recording's worth being the one that we share with everybody, and that now becomes a recorded content. But you need to look at all the facets of your hybrid presentation and pull them all together in the way that makes most sense for you and your team. And the whole idea is, as we said at the beginning, it is to make more of less effort, not make it into a more complicated system with more effort. This presentation was outlined by me in about an hour. I then spent 15 minutes with ChatGPT throwing it around because that was my verification system. I then copied and pasted it into a PowerPoint. I added my notes, which are down there, which is not good. They should always be over here. So when I look at them, it's as if I'm thinking, but that's setup I need to change. So I can check on my notes. And poor Mike has had no previous knowledge of what this presentation was, apart from he probably read the title and the description in the hub, but he had no idea exactly what was going to be on it. So it probably took an hour and a half to create this presentation, and it's probably taken an hour and 20 minutes to deliver it. So that is good news. And that is without any pre-recorded content. We could do this webinar again and again. Although if you are, then you do want to think about your content and how it will work on a future version. Therefore, you wouldn't want to refer to anything that mentions dates and times if it's going to stay in the recording, because otherwise it'll be out of date immediately. You want to think of how the pre-recorded is going to work and which bits is going to be the live bits that you have in between. All takes planning, but when you get it right, it's easier. And if your main presenter is not going to be available, then they do all their main presentations and you have a second person, like Mike could be doing that for me. Mike could be doing MC in between the bits. And I wouldn't even have to turn up. I could go on holiday for 3 weeks and Mike could do the MCing in between. And then Mike might then bring in somebody else to run production studio to do all the scenes. So he can just carry on introducing and intros and outros and dealing with the chat of the audience, which we don't have one today, but he could be introducing and working with the audience. And then he could leave the main presentations and just pass them over to me as I pass things to him and he passed them over to me. So have a go. Have a go at hybrid. That's exactly what we're going to be doing because I have a lot of presentations which I want to have repeated on a regular basis. And I don't want to have to sit down and rewrite them every single time, especially as I am the person that does them impromptuly. And that would get harder and harder because my impromptu, if you do impromptu presentations over and over again, it stops being impromptu and your brain starts remembering great big hulking paragraphs of content and you don't get that flow. You want a simple run of show so everybody knows what is what and where your pre-recorded bits are, And then it's just a question of doing like Mike and I have done. Just do it. Do the presentations, get used to it. It's a really great skill to have. Not only my skill of presenting, but Mike's great skill in just running a production studio. It makes the whole thing so much smoother. I haven't got to worry about whether I'm presenting the slide or talking to the audience. I haven't got to make that logical step. I just need to present and keep up with my slides. As you see, in most cases, I go ahead of my slides because I don't believe that I should read slides off the screen, and I don't. The slides are there to remind you of the main points, and I just then talk around them. And now I look down to find out where the arrow button is so I can go to my next slide. If you get to the end of this and you find that you want help, what are you going to do? Well, there is a webinar about Production Studio from Zoom themselves, but it really is a sort of technical overview of what the tool is. It's not really long enough to go into the great detail that we're going to go into. I say we are going to go into because I've already got planned out a presentation to show you how to run this type of environment. It's already 90 minutes plus. It's probably going to be 2 hours by the time we actually run it. Planning to run it next week, but it's probably going to be 2 hours of content. But we're going to give you a basis of running a hybrid workshop. Mike doesn't know exactly how it's all going to work, and he's never going to know, because that way he can be our student to work with us and can ask the questions and give us the interaction. Of course, if you are available, and this is now dating this presentation, but we are delivering this on the 2nd of December. And next week we will do the live one. I've got to make sure that Mike's going to be available long enough to be able to be part of it. And we will deliver that. And if you want to next week join us either on YouTube or in the studio, then you just need to contact john@lordzoom.com. And if you're in time, you'll join that. If not, guess what? I plan during 2026 to run a webinar along those lines on a regular basis. However, there are two things that I must warn you about if you have it in 2026. The one is there is likely to be a nominal charge, because I don't want to fill up my 500-seat audience or even my 1,000-seat audience with people who are not going to turn up. So there'll be a nominal charge to make sure those people that book in do turn up and make use of the spaces. And the second thing is, obviously, the training on how to use a Simulive and pre-recorded and recorded content is going to include a Simulive and pre-recorded and recorded content as well. But there will be, during that, some interaction, some Q&A, some chat, and maybe even, although I'm worried it's going to make it too long, maybe even some breakout sessions to discuss things. But we'll have to see if there'll be enough room. It may be that once we've written the whole thing, it could be a 2-session event to break it up, but we'll see how that goes. Please, if you're interested in that, then send an email to john@lordzoom.com, and depending whenever I receive the email, I'll tell you what's available at that particular time. Hybrid working is a really good cost-saving method of producing lots more content with lots less effort. I'm really proud of Mike helping me with this whole thing, because we do not practice. Our presentations are our practice. We do not prepare the details of our content. We just present either slides or an outline of our content. And usually I do that, and Mike doesn't know what it is until we get to the live event. But his knowledge on this production side, which is extensive, allows him to drop in his content and come out with some really useful things that I wouldn't even know about. Once you start creating these types of webinars, I promise you, it's a lot easier than you ever think it would be, because you have the knowledge already, don't you, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're talking about a product or a presentation or a technology, and you're an expert in that technology, then if I had 5 or 6 common questions that people ask, you don't need to practice that day after day and script it, do you? I would just ask you the questions and you would give me an answer.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it all comes down to, you know, it, repetitive usage of stuff. Absolutely. But yeah,
So if I asked you what advantage I'd have using a PTZ camera in my setup, you would immediately have an answer because your company are experts in PTZ cameras and that's your business. So anybody else who's producing a webinar out there, they're going to be an expert and their knowledge is going to be on their subject, but their webinars are going to be on their subject. So it shouldn't be difficult for you to deliver content. You don't have to script it all because I'm sure you, as your salespeople, if you're asked about a particular product and its features, you're going to know those at a drop of a hat, aren't you?
absolutely. Especially if they are equivalent to the what you would call an FAQ type scenario on a website. So if it's related to, again, depending on our dealer's knowledge, they might go all the way to basic. I don't know anything about this product. Give me some basic high level stuff so I can actually talk to my customer and be semi coherent in understanding his questions or her questions, or I'm an expert in this product and prove to me that your product is at least like this or like that, or does it compare to, I've used this before is a popular one that our salespeople will hear. I've used this brand before and this product from that brand before. Does the brand that you distribute in Canada have similar product? And if so, is it as good or is it better than the product that I've used before? So just examples like that. And
Yeah.
those are very common for our sales team to be answering all the time, especially depending on the knowledge of our dealers and depending on what they've used in the past or what they've sold in the past, and might not realize that the brand itself has done a good enough job to get that granular in that information so that the dealer will understand that, yeah, they're good too. They're good too.
And you've
Similar
got the
example.
option. Yeah, you've got the option to answer those in the live sessions, or
Yep.
you've got the option to answer it through the Q&A or through the chat. You can
Right.
remember in the
Exactly.
webinars, you can attach technology. You can attach documents about your technology in the webinar, so people can download the documents, or they could be links to your website to go and have a look at the particular product. So it's all available there. And again, the preparation of that means that the webinar just flows easily.
Yeah. And again, you said the right word, flow. That's why I was very specific when I was, but when I've been watching you, John, is that I've also been educating myself on certain things that you haven't been saying or that I have not necessarily realized or known when it came to all the different topic that we're talking about today about Simulive and hybrid, et cetera, et cetera. So again, you've got to take into consideration that as long as I understand what John is talking about, as far as production quality was concerned, if I understood it, chances are you understood it as our participants in our webinar, as well as participants that are watching us live on YouTube and potentially in the future in archive.
And YouTube, we must mention this because I forgot to mention it. YouTube with Zoom has a problem. When you do a normal meeting or a webinar, you can do things in the meeting or webinar that YouTube doesn't see. One of the advantages of us running this through Production Studio is that we know that exactly what we see in Production Studio is exactly the same thing which goes to YouTube. And Mike was raising his hand there. Were you raising your hand to share if that shows up on the feed?
I was looking to see if that actually would show up on Production Studio, and it does not. That raise hand. So, but yes, that does. That's great. Yeah. So I'm going to lower my hand, and then I'm going to be like John and do what he just did, which is officially send with effect. So that officially does work in Production Studio and does go through. So our friends on YouTube should actually be seeing that as well.
And they do.
And they do.
So there we are. A few people asked to come to this event and then didn't turn up, which is why I'm going to start charging a nominal fee for those to make sure they do. But for you people on YouTube, thank you so much for your time. Mike, if we could just share the last slide. Thank you very much. There are 3 things you can do. There are 3 ways you can interact with Lord Zoom. You can just watch all the pre-recorded stuff, and you're very welcome to see what we put on YouTube. I'm not going to take it down. It's going to stay on YouTube for as long as YouTube allow us to leave it there. There is also the option that if you find out what we're doing, you can interact with us live as a member of the audience, or even from YouTube itself. And I am retired from running events for other people. That's not true. I still have 2 or 3 customers I do the odd event for. But on the whole, I've retired from running events for other people. But I don't have any problem with the events that I'm running to teach you to run the events. So I'm running events to show you how to run events. And if you want to book up one of those, have a look at the website and you'll see the dates. There are a whole plethora of dates that I'll be announcing for 2026 to allow you to join those things. And we will keep the theme of production studio and webinars as a regular subject for Lord Zoom Live. And we'll be looking at some of the other technology and things around, including the equipment that we can use around the technology and not just the technology itself. And that's where Mike's going to be jolly useful because he knows all about that really well. But that is all for this presentation. It's taken 90 minutes to explain the outlines. That's why I'm skeptical that I can do an hour's presentation of how to do it, because it's taken us 90 minutes just to explain the outline of how it works. I have a feeling it could be 2 episodes of producing the quality that we want and the quantity that we need to cover everything. But for this presentation, our time is over. Thank you so much again for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and all the other things you can do. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Have a good week.
We open wide the virtual stage where ideas spark and wisdom fills the page. From the UK to the land of maple trees, John and Mike bring clarity with ease. We're building meetings, webinars with might, helping you shine your message, taking flight. Whether you're new or you've done this before, Lord Zoom Live will help you do much more. We're building meetings, webinars with might, helping you shine your message, taking flight. Whether you're new or you've done this before, Lord Zoom Live will help you do much more. Thank you for joining us, we're glad you're here. Together we grow, it's loud and clear. On Zoom we connect, we learn, we grow. Welcome my friend, enjoy the show. To breakout rooms with flair, we've got the tools and we're ready to share. Guest experts drop in, bringing gold each time, with insights and tricks to help you climb. Can't make it live, we've got you still on YouTube and LinkedIn. We're giving that thrill. So tune in later or catch us next round. Either way, your success is where we're bound. Thank you for joining us, we're glad you're here. Together we grow, it's loud and clear. On Zoom we connect, we learn, we glow. Welcome my friend, enjoy the show. And making life, we've got you still. On YouTube and LinkedIn, we're giving that thrill. So tune in later or catch us next round. Either way, your success is where we're bound. Now take the spotlight, the stage is yours. Bring your message through virtual doors. Each week we gather, and now you know you're not alone, so let it flow. Thank you for joining us, now go and shine. Share what you've learned, your voice, your time. With Lord Zoom Live, your power will grow. It's time to build your own show.